Hey guys, tonight we delve into a murder mystery from 1001 Nights that starts, oddly enough, with fruit. You find yourself wandering through a bustling Baghdad market, the air thick with cardamom, roasted chickpeas, and sticky dates glistening under lantern light. But as you drift past baskets of citrus and pomegranate, there's a sudden hush among the vendors. Ahead, guards stand over a rolled-up reed mat, and beneath it is a body, limp, pale, and unmistakably dead. This is no ordinary back-alley murder. Whispers ripple that the corpse belonged to a beautiful young woman. Next to her lay 3 bright, polished apples, their skins a perfect sheen of red and gold. You hear an old woman mutter that each apple could buy half her home. Nearby, children crane their necks for a look, hoping for drama to offset their dusty boredom. And as you edge closer, you overhear 2 guards gossip about how the caliph himself ordered an investigation. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Also, drop your city and local time in the comments so I know where and when you're listening from tonight. Now, dim the lights. Maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You trudge through the market crowd, thinking how historians still argue whether Baghdad's apple varieties were actually imported from Persia or local hybrids grafted by river farmers. Either way, it's a brutal end for a woman, lying lifeless beside fruit worth more than many men's yearly wages. The soft night breeze cools your cheek, carrying the faint scent of rosewater poured on the body to mask the early hints of decay. A merchant packing away his spices notices your gaze and mutters that you probably won't survive this if you keep staring at royal investigations. You pretend to check the cinnamon sticks instead. To your left, an elderly man with silver thread robes prays under his breath for the victim's soul, or perhaps for his own safety. After all, this murder isn't just gossip. The Caliph Harun al-Rashid's court is infamous for swift, theatrical justice. And soon, someone's neck will pay the price. Historical fact: the real Harun al-Rashid reigned from 786 to 809 CE and was known for nightly disguises to wander Baghdad, ensuring his city's moral order, a habit that also conveniently fueled court paranoia. You edge away from the guards, stepping over spilled lentils and a crushed fig, wondering if the victim's family knows she lies here in silence tonight. As you leave the market gates, your sandals crunch tiny gravel mixed with seeds. You pass a beggar fanning flies off a chipped clay bowl, and he calls out that the apples must have come from Basra, since only Basra's trees bear fruit so sweet it could poison the heart with longing. Quirky tidbit: in medieval Arabic folklore, apples were linked not only to love and beauty, but also to melancholy cures, believed to soothe the sorrows of the heart when sliced thin and sprinkled with sugar. But tonight, sorrow seems irreversible. You glance back once more, the 3 apples catching moonlight in a silent triangle around the girl's pale arm. Somewhere in the dark alleys beyond, her killer is probably chewing dates and spitting the pits into the dirt, convinced his secret is safe. You continue along the shadowed streets of Baghdad, your robes brushing against stone walls still warm from the day's sun. Word spreads quickly through the city's veins. The Caliph Harun al-Rashid has issued an ultimatum. His vizier, Ja'far ibn Yahya, must solve the murder within 3 days, or be executed in her place. You pause to imagine that. 3 days to untangle a corpse, 3 apples, and a mystery no one wants solved. At the palace, oil lamps flicker in tall brass holders, casting trembling shadows on mosaic floors. You slip unseen among the crowd gathering near the audience hall. The caliph sits on his throne, his embroidered robe pooled like spilled ink around his feet. his beard brushed smooth and black. His dark eyes glitter with irritation as he speaks to Ja'far, his favorite but often most unfortunate vizier. 3 days, he growls, each syllable dropping like a blade onto marble. Find her killer, or your head decorates my gate. You watch Ja'far bow low, his forehead almost touching the ivory tiles. There is no tremor in his hands, though you suspect his stomach twists with dread. Historians still argue whether Harun's dramatic threats were routine theater or evidence of deeper paranoia rooted in the endless Abbasid palace intrigues. Either way, no one dared test the truth. As Ja'far exits the hall, you drift behind him down corridors lined with perfumed cedar panels. He clutches his robes, walking fast, whispering prayers under his breath. Outside, dawn edges the horizon with dull pink. Roosters begin crowing, and the scent of baking flatbread drifts over the palace walls. You realize he has not slept. Neither have you. Quirky tidbit. It said Harun al-Rashid once owned a pet monkey dressed in gold-embroidered robes who attended court banquets to amuse dignitaries. Imagine being sentenced to death while a monkey gnawed walnuts in a miniature turban nearby. Ja'far gathers his trusted guards and scribes in the courtyard. You stand among them, the dew chilling your toes. His voice is low and exhausted as he orders them to scour Baghdad for anyone who knew the dead girl, for every apple seller within 50 leagues, for every slave or child carrying an unusual fruit. You think how unfair it is that in stories, viziers are either cunning demons or tragic geniuses. In real life, Ja'far is simply tired. As he mounts his gray Arab mare, you notice his eyes flick to the sunrise. For a moment, he seems to measure its warmth against the cold certainty of execution. Then he rides out, and you follow, hooves clattering through gates that creak open for a doomed investigation. You probably won't survive this either, if you were truly there. But at least you would see Baghdad's dawn bloom over palm groves, minarets, and silent towers before your end. Your stomach grumbles. You realize you've skipped breakfast. Someone nearby offers roasted chickpeas wrapped in waxed parchment. You take them gratefully, crunching each one as Ja'far leads his party toward the city's southern market district, where rows of apple carts stand under reed canopies. The scent is sharp and sweet, cutting through the grime of donkey dung and stale river mud. Mainstream historical fact: Baghdad's markets in Harun al-Rashid's time were so extensive that travelers reported walking for hours without seeing the same stall twice. Each market street dedicated to a single trade. Apples here, figs there, silks beyond, but no fruit seller greets Ja'far with truth today. As he questions each merchant, eyes dart nervously. No one wants royal entanglements. The caliph's justice is swift but often blind. One old man shows his empty crates and shrugs. Another insists his orchard only grows bitter yellow apples unfit for lovers' gifts. The sun rises higher, burning away the cool morning shadows. Sweat beads along your hairline. Ja'far wipes his brow, his despair ripening like a bruised fruit with each passing hour. You watch him sigh, whispering to his scribe to write down every name anyway. Perhaps the murderer is among them. Perhaps the apples themselves carry their own curse. As noon approaches, the scent of apples grows cloying, almost nauseating, and your mind wanders to the victim again. Her life ended over fruit, beauty, and pride. You follow Ja'far down winding alleys where the shadows of woven awnings stripe the dusty ground like tiger pelts. His horse steps lightly, its silver bells jingling with each cautious trot. But there is no joy in their music today. You trail behind him, your sandals slapping the hard-packed dirt as you weave past bakers pulling flatbreads from clay ovens, their edges charred to a crisp perfection. The scent curls your empty stomach into a tight fist of longing. Ja'far's eyes scan every stall, every cluster of gossiping women, every child darting between carts. He halts before a tall fruit merchant with arms like olive trunks and a beard tied neatly with thread. The vizier asks about apples. 3 specific apples, bright as painted gold. The merchant bows low, his voice polite yet hollow. He insists his orchard bore no such apples that week. Historians still argue whether Baghdad's merchants truly feared royal questioning, or simply calculated the bribe they would need to remain untroubled. You shift your weight from foot to foot as Ja'far moves on, his desperation bleeding through his usually calm manner. By midday, the city hums with heat. Flies hover over trays of sweet pastries, and vendors shout prices until their voices rasp dry. At each stall, Ja'far repeats the same quiet question, his scribe recording names with cramped, ink-stained fingers. The sun reflects off polished apple skins in baskets lined with palm fronds, but none match the brilliance of the murder scene's fruit. Quirky tidbit. In medieval Arab medicine, apple syrup mixed with rose water was prescribed for headaches and melancholy, believed to cool the heated humors of the brain. You wonder if Ja'far needs a vat of it right now. At the next stall, a boy with scabbed elbows picks his nose absent-mindedly as he stacks apples into neat pyramids. Ja'far questions him gently, but the boy only grins, revealing a missing tooth and a tongue stained red with stolen pomegranate seeds. You probably won't survive this investigation either, you think, if your fate rested on children's honesty. The vizier moves on, shoulders sagging. You pass a woman grinding spices under a reed awning, her bronze mortar thumping steadily, releasing the earthy scent of cumin and coriander into the air. Her toddler sits beside her, gnawing an apple so sour his eyes water. You wonder if the murdered woman once sat with her own child under morning shade, thinking her life ordinary and safe. Mainstream historical fact. Baghdad under Harun al-Rashid was considered the intellectual heart of the Islamic Golden Age, with vast libraries and scholars gathering at coffee houses to discuss mathematics, astronomy, and poetry. Yet today, its wisdom cannot find a murderer. As Ja'far exits the southern markets empty-handed, sweat darkens the underarms of his linen robe. His horse flicks its tail impatiently, chasing flies away. The scribes murmur prayers under their breath, terrified that failure will mean their lives too. You glance up at a hawk circling high above the minarets, its sharp eyes searching for small movements in the dust. If only Ja'far could borrow such vision to pierce through lies. He turns toward the northern gates, his voice hoarse as he instructs his men to continue the search until nightfall. The day is only half done, but hope has already dried up like the river's edge in drought season. As you follow him northward, your legs ache, your throat parched from dust, and your mind whirls with dread at what will happen if he returns to the palace with nothing but weary apologies. Because tomorrow will be his second day, and the caliph's blade waits patiently for no one. Night falls over Baghdad like black silk, dusting the rooftops and palm crowns with shadow. You follow Ja'far through streets lit by flickering oil lamps, their orange glow illuminating his strained face as he returns to his home. His eyes burn with exhaustion, but sleep is a luxury he cannot afford. Instead, he summons his scribes and guards to review every name collected. Their voices rise and fall like the sighing wind, each no master, nothing found, slicing another thread from his hope. As dawn peeks across the Tigris, painting its ripples in dusky pink, you find yourself trailing Ja'far again to the palace. His sandals slap the cold marble as he approaches Harun al-Rashid's throne. The caliph's gaze sharpens like a falcon spotting prey. Silence fills the hall, thick as date syrup. Ja'far bows so low his turban nearly brushes the polished floor. "Have you found her killer?" the Caliph asks, his voice deceptively calm. Ja'far opens his mouth to plead for more time. But before words emerge, a wailing voice pierces the hall. Guards drag in a man whose beard is wild with grief, his robe torn at the chest. He beats his breast and cries out, I confess, punish me, for I am the cause of her death." You edge closer to hear his trembling story. Historians still argue whether public confessions like these were coerced under threat or freely offered to secure family honor. But as he speaks, his words spill out with the desperate cadence of a drowning man. He tells of his beloved wife, a woman so beautiful that just looking at her stirred jealousy in his veins. One day, as she lay sick with fever, she begged him for an apple, claiming she craved its sharp sweetness to ease her suffering. You watch him wipe his tears on his sleeve as he recounts running through the markets for 3 days until he found 3 perfect apples in the Caliph's own orchard, each costing half a year's wages. Mainstream historical fact. In the Abbasid period, Caliphal gardens were famed for rare fruits, exotic flowers, and engineered water channels, symbols of absolute luxury. The husband placed the apples by his wife's pillow. Her smile, he said, outshone the golden domes of Baghdad's mosques. You probably won't survive this moment either, if you felt the heavy guilt beating in his chest. But days later, as he sat at his shop, he saw a slave walking past, tossing an identical apple in the air, boasting to friends that he'd seduced a married woman who rewarded him with it. The husband's heart rotted with rage. He ran home, confronted his wife, and though she swore innocence, his jealousy deafened him to her pleas. In blind fury, he drew his knife and killed her. Quirky tidbit. Medieval Arab physicians believed severe jealousy caused physical illness, including fevers, liver pains, and insomnia. Perhaps he was already sick with it before her death. As he finishes, the hall remains silent except for his sobs echoing off the tiled walls. Ja'far's eyes close, grief and relief flooding him all at once. The Caliph frowns, studying the husband like a chess piece on his board of justice. You watch his fingers tap the throne's carved armrest as he considers what punishment fits a man who buys love with gold, then destroys it with his own madness. The husband's tears drip onto the marble, pooling beside his trembling knees. You can almost hear his broken whisper, "Take my life, for I cannot bear its weight any more." You stand quietly in the grand audience hall, its vaulted ceiling echoing the husband's sobs. As he kneels before Harun al-Rashid, robes soaked with tears, the Caliph's dark eyes narrow with suspicion. Slowly, he raises a finger and signals the guards to step back. "Tell me," the Caliph says, his voice low as thunder rolling in the distance. "How did this apple reach the slave's hand?" The husband gulps down his sobs, chest heaving. "I do not know, my lord," he whispers. "I bought the apples myself and gave them only to my wife. I never left them unguarded." Historians still argue whether Harun al-Rashid truly relished these drawn-out interrogations, savoring each confession like a date stuffed with almonds, or if he merely believed thoroughness was mercy. Either way, you feel the chill under your robes as his gaze sharpens. Flicking to Ja'far, the Caliph commands Ja'far to uncover the rest of the truth within the day. You follow the vizier back through Baghdad's narrow streets as he drags the husband with him to search for clues. Roosters crow from courtyards, and steam rises from morning pots of lentil porridge, filling the air with savory warmth that turns your stomach with hunger. They arrive at the man's home just after sunrise. You slip inside after them. The house is silent, scented faintly with sandalwood oil and sorrow. In the darkened sleeping chamber, where woven reed mats hang over windows to block the heat. You see 3 tiny footprints traced in flour scattered across the floor. Ja'far crouches and calls for the husband's son. A small boy appears, no older than 6, clutching a wooden horse painted with green stripes. His eyes dart between Ja'far and his father's tear-streaked face. Gently. Ja'far asks him if he took anything from his mother's room. The boy fidgets, rubs his nose, and whispers, "I took an apple to play with, then lost it." Quirky tidbit. Medieval Arab toys included carved wooden animals on wheels, ivory dice, and hollow clay balls filled with pebbles to rattle. But none could rival an apple's glow for childish mischief. The husband's face collapses in fresh horror as his son continues. "I dropped it in the alley while playing, and a slave picked it up. He asked if I'd sell it, so I gave it to him for a copper coin to buy sweets." Mainstream historical fact. Copper coins in the Abbasid Caliphate often bore elegant Kufic script and were widely used by commoners for market purchases. Dates, or honey-soaked fritters. You probably won't survive the guilt rising in the husband's chest now, if you carried it yourself. He sobs so hard his shoulders quake, clutching his son, who begins crying too, unaware of the true depths of his innocent mistake. Ja'far's lips tighten, eyes lifting heavenward as if seeking mercy from the fates that tangle human lives with such cruel irony. You glance out the window where a dove coos softly from a mud brick ledge, unaware of the heartbreak blooming within these walls. The husband rocks back and forth, whispering his dead wife's name like a prayer that will never be answered. As Ja'far orders his guards to prepare the husband for trial, you sense the boy's confusion deepen into terror. He clutches his wooden horse so tightly the paint flakes off under his small fingers. You feel your own chest ache with pity. Outside, the city rumbles awake. Merchants shout prices, donkeys bray, and the scent of fresh bread with sesame seeds drifts through the narrow alleyways. But in this silent room, a man has realized he destroyed his world because he never paused to listen. You walk beside Ja'far through Baghdad's awakening streets, the husband stumbling behind in shackles. The dawn sun gleams off copper lamps hanging from carved wooden balconies. Roosters crow from courtyards, their echo weaving with sellers' cries about saffron, mint, and coriander. But your mind drifts back to the boy's trembling confession. A lost apple, an innocent barter for a copper coin, and a life destroyed in jealous fury. At the palace gates, Ja'far orders guards to detain the husband until final judgment. But before leaving, he commands his men to search the slave quarters across the city. You follow as they move swiftly through alleys lined with drying laundry, ducking under hanging rugs beaten clean for the day. They stop at a low clay house where a group of slaves crouch around a small fire, their breakfast of lentil porridge steaming in chipped bowls. One man sits apart, flicking something shiny into the air and catching it lazily. As you step closer, you see it is an apple. Its skin gleams with the same golden blush as those found by the murdered woman. He smirks at his companions, bragging, "See this apple? A married woman gave it to me after I spent the night with her." Historians still argue whether such boasts reflected reality, or were simply men's attempts to gain status among their peers in a rigidly hierarchical world. Either way, the slave's voice is loud and smug, and he does not notice Ja'far's silent approach. Mainstream historical fact: slavery in the Abbasid Caliphate included domestic servants, soldiers, scribes, and even physicians. Though slaves were technically allowed property and contracts under Islamic law, the guards seize him by the arms, dragging him to his feet. He yelps, the apple falling into the ash. Ja'far bends down, picks it up, and inspects its skin. There, faintly incised, is the royal garden's seal. He holds it up before the trembling slave. "Where did you get this?" Ja'far asks quietly, though his calm voice feels more terrifying than a shout. The slave gulps, eyes darting left and right for escape. Finally, he admits that a little boy sold it to him in the alley. "But I told everyone the mother gave it to me," he adds, glancing at his companions as if to reclaim lost bravado. "Makes me sound important, no?" Quirky tidbit. Medieval Arab bathhouse slaves often used apple vinegar rinses for customers to soften hair and perfume the body. Apples were both luxury fruit and cosmetic staple. You probably won't survive the disgust rolling through Ja'far's chest as he orders the guards to drag the slave to the palace. The vizier's jaw tenses as he walks, sandals slapping the stone in rhythmic fury. You follow silently, dodging a cart piled high with lemons and oranges. The citrus scent is bright and clean, a cruel contrast to the rot festering in human hearts today. At the palace, Harun al-Rashid listens with narrowed eyes as Ja'far recounts the boy's innocent theft and the slave's arrogant lie. The caliph strokes his beard slowly, each finger combing through thick black hair, as if untangling truth from deceit. The husband kneels before him, weeping openly, while the slave cowers with eyes fixed on the marble floor. "Justice will be served," the caliph says at last, his voice quiet but final. You notice the faint tremor in Ja'far's shoulders as relief seeps into his bones. The investigation is nearly complete, but you sense an uneasy coil of fate still tightening in the shadows beyond this hall. Outside, pigeons coo softly under the golden dome, pecking fallen millet grains, unaware of the human lives forever changed within these stone walls. You stand at the edge of the grand audience hall, the sunbeams slanting through colored glass windows, casting jewel-toned pools across the polished marble. The caliph sits silent upon his throne, his dark eyes locked on the weeping husband, the cowering slave, and Ja'far standing stiff with exhaustion. The story has unraveled, its frayed threads laid bare before the court. Yet as you watch, a deeper tragedy emerges like rot beneath perfect fruit skin. The husband trembles as he speaks again, his voice hoarse from weeping. "My wife swore her innocence," he whispers, "but my jealousy deafened me. She told me she never gave the apple to anyone. I killed her anyway." Historians still argue whether executions for honor killings were carried out in Abbasid Baghdad, or if male perpetrators were quietly pardoned under patriarchal custom. Today, Harun al-Rashid's expression is unreadable. His long fingers tap his throne's carved armrest in a steady rhythm, the only sound in the hall. You glance at Ja'far, whose eyes flicker with horror and pity. The husband weeps harder, his tears dripping onto the stone floor. "My son's foolish play," he cries. "My wife's death. I have destroyed everything I loved." Quirky tidbit. Medieval Arab love poetry often used apples as metaphors for beloved cheeks, fragrant hair, or the sweetness of secret kisses. But here, that sweetness has curdled into bitter regret. The caliph leans forward. "You took an innocent life for your own pride," he says softly. "And you?" He turns to the slave. "Spread slander for your own amusement." His gaze moves back to Ja'far. "And you, my vizier, took days to uncover a truth lying in the dust beneath your feet. You probably won't survive the tension threading the hall right now, if you felt it squeeze your chest with its iron grip." The caliph stands, his robe falling around him in silent waves of black silk, embroidered with gold talismans. "Justice must be swift," he pronounces. "The slave shall be executed for his lie that led to this tragedy." Mainstream historical fact. In the Abbasid courts, slander and false witness were punished severely, sometimes with execution if it resulted in wrongful death. The slave screams as guards drag him away, his cries echoing down stone corridors. The husband slumps forward, tears dripping from his beard. You watch him rock back and forth, whispering his dead wife's name over and over, as if each repetition could summon her back from the silent darkness. But the caliph isn't finished. His eyes flicker with a cruel spark as he turns to Ja'far. "Your investigation was slow and your methods sloppy," he says, his voice cold as river water at dawn. "Remember, Vizier, my mercy has limits." Ja'far bows low, forehead pressed to marble, his shoulders trembling. As he rises, you notice his eyes glisten, though whether with tears or sweat you cannot tell. Outside, pigeons flutter down onto sun-warmed roof tiles, cooing softly as if mocking human grief with their simple morning songs. You step into the palace courtyard as Ja'far walks out, shoulders sagging under the weight of failure and fear. The air smells of rosewater sprinkled on sun-heated flagstones to settle the dust. As he mounts his horse, the city's calls rise around him. Vendors hawking dates and dried apricots, donkey carts rumbling past, children laughing and chasing a rolling copper coin down the lane. But to Ja'far, everything sounds muted, as though grief and dread have pressed cotton into his ears. You trail him silently, the hooves of his horse striking rhythmic sorrow into the quiet morning as he rides home to his own household, unaware that fate's cruel tangle has yet another knot waiting for him just beyond his threshold. You follow Ja'far through Baghdad's winding streets, the morning light glaring off whitewashed walls and copper domes. His horse plods wearily toward his home, head drooping as though it too carries the burden of impending doom. Ja'far's eyes remain fixed ahead, dark shadows etched beneath them from sleepless nights. The crowd parts silently for him, sensing the invisible cloud of fear swirling in his wake. He dismounts before his gate, handing the reins to a servant without a word. As you enter his courtyard, the scent of jasmine drifts from clay pots arranged along the carved stone fountain. Slaves rush forward to bow, but he waves them away and moves straight to his private chambers. You trail him through darkened hallways, cooled with damp reed blinds and perfumed with sandalwood smoke curling lazily from brass burners. Historians still argue whether viziers in Harun al-Rashid's court were truly powerful or merely elaborate scapegoats for royal failures. Today, Ja'far feels very much the latter. In his study, he sinks onto a silk cushion, resting his head in his hands. His thoughts spiral with dread. The caliph's parting words still echo in his ears. "My mercy has limits." You watch his scribes approach timidly, scrolls of unfinished accounts clutched in trembling hands. He waves them away with a sigh. Quirky tidbit. Medieval scribes often chewed fennel seeds to freshen breath and stave off hunger while copying long texts. You notice a faint scent of fennel each time they exhale in nervous gasps. Ja'far rises abruptly and paces to the window. Outside, pigeons coo atop mud brick ledges, preening in the warm sunlight. You hear the distant call to prayer floating over the rooftops, weaving with the cries of fruit sellers hawking figs and sour plums. But the serenity of the city does nothing to calm the fear clawing inside him. He calls his steward and orders the household accounts brought forward. Perhaps, he thinks, burying himself in mundane tasks will distract him from the looming threat of execution. The steward bows and hurries away, returning moments later with a heavy cedar chest bound with bronze straps. Two slaves set it down with a thud on the mosaic floor. Ja'far waves them out of the chamber. As silence settles, he leans forward and undoes the latch. But as he lifts the lid, expecting wax tablets and scrolls, his breath catches in his throat. You peer over his shoulder, and your heart stutters. Inside the chest lies a young girl, her wrists bound with silk cord, her eyes wide with terror. Her dress is richly embroidered, her hair oiled and coiled with golden threads. Tears streak her cheeks as she whimpers through the cloth gag tied across her mouth. You probably won't survive the horror that blooms in Ja'far's chest at this sight, if it were you standing here. His knees almost give way beneath him as he clasps the chest edge for balance. His mind reels with dread. If the Caliph discovers this girl hidden in his household, his death will be neither swift nor merciful. Mainstream historical fact. Wealthy Abbasid families often employed child slave girls as personal attendants, entertainers, or concubines, their lives entirely controlled by master's whims. Ja'far tears away her gag. She gasps and sobs. "Please, my lord, do not let them drown me." Confusion swirls with horror in Ja'far's eyes. "Drown you," he croaks, voice cracking from fear and fatigue. The girl nods frantically, her golden earrings trembling against tear-wet cheeks. "They were taking me to the river to sink me in secret. But someone hid me here to save me." Ja'far staggers back, his mind a storm of dread, pity, and terror. Outside, doves flutter down onto the courtyard fountain, dipping their beaks into cool water as though the world is still peaceful and unbroken. But within these stone walls, you feel fate's grip tighten around Ja'far's throat, whispering that the nightmare is only beginning. Ja'far stumbles back from the chest, his silk robes tangling around his ankles as he grips a carved pillar for support. The girl sobs quietly within the wooden box, her bound wrists trembling against her embroidered dress. You watch her tears drip onto the cedar planks, soaking into the fragrant wood. Outside, pigeons coo softly, their calls drifting through the latticed windows like faint echoes of hope that feel so far away right now. He kneels beside her, untying the silken cords with trembling fingers. "Who are you?" he whispers, his voice hoarse with panic. "Why were you to be drowned?" She sniffles, rubbing her raw wrists as she chokes out her story. "I am the daughter of your neighbor. My lord, my father promised me in marriage to a rich old merchant, but I refused. I begged and begged. In his rage, he ordered his servants to drown me in secret so his honor would not be stained by a disobedient daughter." Historians still argue whether such clandestine honor killings were common practice, or rare tragedies amplified in courtly tales for moral warning. You feel your chest tighten as her words sink in, imagining the terror that must have consumed her in the silent dark of that chest. Quirky tidbit: medieval Arab women, especially those from merchant families, often learned to recite long poetic passages as part of their education, ensuring they could host salons or serve as cultured wives. This girl's clear speech hints at such an upbringing despite her tears. Ja'far's mind races, sweat dampening his temples. He paces the chamber, silk slippers whispering against mosaic tiles. If the Caliph discovers a girl hidden in his household, no matter her story, Ja'far's head will roll alongside the girl's corpse. You probably won't survive this either if your fate rested on the Caliph's flickering moods. Mainstream historical fact: Harun al-Rashid's justice was known to be swift, theatrical, and often brutal. Scholars record entire families executed for minor offenses to maintain order and fear. Ja'far stops pacing, his chest rising and falling rapidly. He calls for his steward, voice low and urgent. "Bring me parchment and ink," he commands, "and summon 2 trusted guards at once." The girl watches him with wide, hopeful eyes. You sense her prayers radiating silently, wrapping around him like desperate threads of gratitude and fear. As the steward hurries back with parchment, Ja'far writes swiftly, his reed pen scratching over the creamy surface. You crane your neck to glimpse his words. "To Harun al-Rashid, commander of the faithful, may your reign be as eternal as the stars. I beg your mercy to hear my petition." He orders his guards to carry the girl, hidden under heavy veils, to the caliph's court. They lift her gently, their calloused hands surprisingly careful against her delicate arms. You trail behind as Ja'far strides out, his robes flaring in the morning breeze that carries the scent of cardamom bread baking in nearby ovens. The palace looms ahead, its golden dome gleaming under the rising sun. Your heart thuds in your chest as you pass through the gates, flanked by guards in bronze-studded leather with curved scimitars at their belts. Inside, the cool marble floors soothe your dust-hot feet, but tension thrums in the air like a hidden harp string. Ja'far leads his entourage into the vast throne hall, where Harun al-Rashid sits upon his black and gold throne, his gaze sharp as a falcon's. As Ja'far bows low, the girl kneels beside him, veiled and trembling. You feel the hush fall over the court, the silent dread that always precedes his judgments. You wonder if today mercy will win, or if another life will dissolve into dust beneath the caliph's uncompromising rule. The throne hall is silent, heavy with expectation, as you stand among courtiers perfumed with oud and rose oil. Harun al-Rashid leans forward, his jeweled rings glinting in morning light filtering through carved stone lattices. His gaze pierces Ja'far, who bows low, forehead pressed to the cool marble, while the veiled girl kneels trembling beside him. "Rise, Ja'far," the caliph commands softly. You hear his voice echo faintly under the dome, like thunder rumbling over distant hills. Ja'far lifts his head, eyes shadowed with dread and exhaustion. "Commander of the faithful," he begins, voice quivering only slightly. "I found this girl hidden in my household accounts chest this dawn. She is the daughter of my neighbor, condemned to secret drowning by her own father for refusing a marriage she could not accept." Historians still argue whether Harun al-Rashid truly enjoyed these daily dramas, or whether their endless flow wore down his patience like river water wears stone. Today, his expression is unreadable. His gaze shifts to the girl, still veiled and shaking like a reed in winter winds. "Uncover her face," he orders. You probably won't survive the trembling in her limbs as a guard lifts her veil, revealing tear-reddened eyes, a bruised cheek, and golden earrings catching the dawn's glow. Gasps ripple through the silent court at her youth and delicate beauty. You watch her lips quiver as she whispers, "Please, my lord, spare my life." Quirky tidbit. Abbasid courtiers believed that seeing a beautiful face at dawn brought good luck for the day, a superstition woven from pre-Islamic Persian customs about light, beauty, and fortune. The caliph's gaze softens, though his voice remains iron. "And why did her father seek her death?" Ja'far bows again. "Because she refused his marriage arrangement with an elderly merchant, preferring death to a union she could not accept. Yet one servant, moved by pity, hid her in the chest that I found this morning." Mainstream historical fact. Marriage contracts in medieval Islamic society required female consent in theory, but in practice, family honor often overrode legal requirements, leaving many women voiceless. You see Harun al-Rashid's fingers drum his throne's carved armrest as he considers her fate. The hall remains silent, except for the soft rustle of robes and the girl's muffled sobs. Finally, he exhales and shakes his head. "Bring her father here immediately," he orders. Guards bow low before hurrying out with sandals slapping marble, their armor jangling softly in the tense quiet. The caliph turns his gaze back to Ja'far. "You," he says, his tone shifting like cold river water around stone, "have brought both sorrow and truth before me today. Yet your duties remain unfinished. Ja'far lowers his eyes. Command me, my lord. The Caliph leans back against gold-embroidered cushions. The apple murder has been resolved, he says, his voice quiet but final. The slave shall die for his lie. The husband shall be pardoned, for grief and guilt will punish him far beyond what death can offer. Historians still argue whether this final judgment reflects Harun's legendary wisdom or simply a ruler's tired pragmatism after days of courtly chaos. You probably won't survive the ripple of relief and horror that floods through the hall as his words settle. The husband, who kneels nearby, slumps forward, his tears dripping onto the marble floor, whispering his wife's name like a prayer no god will ever answer. The guards drag the screaming slave out, his cries fading down echoing corridors. Meanwhile, the girl remains kneeling, her thin shoulders shaking with silent sobs as she waits for her father's arrival. You glance at Ja'far, who sways faintly on his feet, exhaustion gnawing at his bones. But his eyes remain fixed on the Caliph's face, knowing this day is far from over. Outside, the city roars with its waking chaos. Donkey carts rumble over stone bridges, vendors hawk cardamom and ginger, and the Tigris flows on, indifferent to human tragedies unfurling within palace walls. You stand in the shadow of a marble pillar as the girl's father is dragged into the hall. His robe rumpled, beard uncombed, eyes darting in terror at the towering guards flanking him. The Caliph watches with narrowed eyes, fingers tapping a silent rhythm against his throne's carved armrest. You notice a thin tremor in the man's knees as he bows low, forehead pressed to the polished floor, his lips murmuring prayers swallowed by the vast quiet. "Is this your daughter?" Harun al-Rashid asks, his voice soft as an unsheathed blade. The man lifts his gaze and sees her kneeling there, tear-streaked face bowed, gold-threaded scarf slipping from her oiled hair. His shoulders slump as he nods silently, eyes flicking to Ja'far in accusation, though whether for exposing him or saving her, you cannot tell. Historians still argue whether public shaming like this in Abbasid courts aimed to deter honor crimes or merely reinforced patriarchal power under the guise of justice. Either way, the hall holds its breath as the Caliph's gaze turns icy. "You would drown your own blood for refusing your will?" he asks, each syllable echoing under the high vaulted ceiling. The father gulps, trembling, before blurting out, "I did it to protect my honor, my lord. She defied me before neighbors and family." The Caliph lifts a hand, silencing him mid-sentence. "You probably won't survive the cold fury simmering in those dark eyes if it were turned upon you." He leans forward, robe pooling like dark water around his feet. "Your honor is nothing but pride soaked in cruelty," he says quietly. "It is men like you who rot the pillars of this realm with your false dignity." Quirky tidbit. Medieval Arab society viewed family honor as a currency of status, but storytellers often satirized such men in court poetry as foolish peacocks obsessed with plumage over truth. The girl begins to sob quietly, her thin shoulders shaking with relief and terror. Ja'far watches silently, hands clasped tightly in his robes to hide their trembling. You sense the vizier's exhaustion, his mind already tallying every ripple this judgment will cause among Baghdad's merchant families. Mainstream historical fact: Caliph Harun al-Rashid was famed for mingling anonymously among citizens at night to hear complaints and uncover corruption. A ruler who balanced theatrical severity with personal intervention. The Caliph's eyes soften as he turns back to the girl. "Rise, child," he commands. She stands shakily, clutching her scarf to her chest, eyes wide and glistening. You will remain under palace protection until I arrange your marriage to a man of honor who values your mind as well as your obedience." At these words, the girl bows low, tears dripping onto the marble floor, whispering, "May God bless you with long life, my lord." The father begins to protest, but the caliph's gaze slices him into silence. "You shall be fined half your wealth and publicly shamed for attempted murder. May it remind other fathers that a daughter's will is not a man's possession." Historians still argue whether such judgments reflected genuine progressive justice or were calculated performances to secure popular loyalty among female courtiers and educated families. As guards drag the father away, his protests echo down the hall like the distant bray of a beaten donkey. You watch the girl sag in relief, her thin fingers trembling around the golden hem of her scarf. Ja'far exhales shakily, his body slumping with a fatigue so deep it quivers through his bones. Outside, the golden sun climbs higher, illuminating Baghdad's rooftops, painted wooden shutters, and domes that gleam like molten honey. Merchants shout over piles of plums and watermelons, while donkey carts rattle across stone bridges. But within these palace walls, justice has unfurled its double-edged blade today, and you sense its taste lingering like bitter myrrh upon every tongue. You trail Ja'far out of the throne hall, his footsteps echoing across marble in tired resignation. The scent of rosewater and incense fades behind you as he enters the sunlit courtyard, pausing to inhale deeply as if to gather strength. Birds flutter between carved stone arches, cooing softly, their feathers ruffling in the warm breeze, carrying whispers of cinnamon and fresh bread from distant market stalls. Ja'far turns to one of his guards. "Bring my horse," he says, voice rasping with fatigue. As the guard bows and hurries away, Ja'far leans against a column, closing his eyes for a fleeting moment of rest. You probably won't survive the exhaustion draining him if it were you bearing the caliph's expectations upon your narrow shoulders. Historians still argue whether viziers like Ja'far wielded genuine administrative power or were simply elegant scapegoats for royal whims. Today, he feels more like the latter. The guard returns with his horse, a tall, dapple-gray mare adorned with silver bells that chime softly as she tosses her head. Ja'far mounts with a grimace, his muscles aching from sleepless nights. You ride alongside him through Baghdad's bustling streets, passing a group of children playing knucklebones under fig trees and women gathering at a public fountain to fill brass pitchers. Quirky tidbit: medieval Arab children played knucklebones with goat or sheep ankle bones, sometimes carving them with symbols for luck. Learning early that games taught both skill and fate's fickle rules, the vizier pauses at the city's southern gate, glancing at the Tigris flowing slow and wide under morning sun. "We ride to the caliph's orchard," he tells his guards. "There are debts unpaid. You follow as his entourage passes groves of apricots, pomegranates, and figs, the air sweet with ripening fruit. At last, they reach the royal orchard where gardeners in linen tunics prune branches and gather fallen apples into wicker baskets. The head gardener bows deeply at Ja'far's approach, sweat dripping from his brow. "Vizier, how may I serve you this morning?" he asks. Ja'far's gaze sharpens. 3 apples were purchased from here days ago. Tell me of that transaction." The gardener's sun-darkened face creases in confusion. "Yes, my lord. A desperate man came 3 days past, seeking apples to save his ailing wife. I told him these were rare fruits reserved for the caliph's table, but he wept until I relented, selling them at half a year's wage each. Mainstream historical fact. Apples were luxury fruits imported from distant lands into Baghdad's elite gardens, prized for their crisp texture and sweet tart flavor rarely cultivated locally." Ja'far nods, his expression distant as puzzle pieces slot together in his mind. The gardener continues, voice tinged with pride. Those apples were picked at dawn, still cool with river mist clinging to their skin. You watch Ja'far's shoulders tighten, remembering the husband's confession, the boy's innocent barter, the slave's arrogant lie, and the murdered woman's smile fading forever. He gazes across rows of apple trees heavy with fruit and sighs deeply, the breeze rustling leaves like whispering ghosts. You sense his grief curling cold within him, so many lives shattered by a single golden apple. Probably the caliph will never know these quiet moments of sorrow that ripple through his vizier's chest. To the ruler, justice was served. But to Ja'far, every solved crime births new ghosts, trailing him through the city's alleys, lingering behind palace curtains, haunting his sleep like shadows with unblinking eyes. As he turns his horse back toward the palace, pigeons whirl into the sky, their wings flashing silver in the sun. Their cries echo like distant laughter over the orchard, a reminder that nature carries on heedless of human grief. The road back to Baghdad winds along the Tigris, its muddy waters glinting under the high sun. You ride beside Ja'far, the vizier silent atop his gray mare, robes rippling in the river breeze scented faintly with silt and wild mint. His gaze remains fixed on the horizon where the domes of the city shimmer like mirages. You sense his mind far away, tangled in regrets and obligations neither prayer nor power can ease. They reach the palace gates by noon. Guards bow low as Ja'far dismounts, his sandals slapping against the sun-heated marble. Inside, the cool shadowed halls echo with hurried footsteps of scribes carrying scrolls, eunuchs bearing trays of sherbet and chilled rosewater, and guards whispering orders beneath crested bronze helmets. Historians still argue whether Harun al-Rashid's palace employed hundreds or thousands of staff, though some chronicles boast of an army of servants bustling through its courtyards day and night. Ja'far is summoned at once to the caliph's private chamber. You follow him down a corridor lined with carved panels depicting hunting scenes, ibex chased by leopards, falcons diving for partridge, lions wrestling beneath date palms. Each panel shimmers with inlaid pearl and jade, glowing softly in torchlight despite the bright noon outside. Quirky tidbit: Abbasid palace woodcarvers sometimes hid their names in tiny Kufic inscriptions along carved borders, a secret signature surviving centuries of conquests and restoration inside the chamber. Harun al-Rashid reclines on silk cushions, a bronze incense burner puffing pale curls of sandalwood smoke beside him. He gestures Ja'far forward with 2 fingers, his expression unreadable beneath heavy brows. "You have done well in uncovering the truth," he says softly. "But you carry sadness upon you like a drenched cloak. Speak." Ja'far bows low. "Commander of the faithful, justice has been served. Yet so many lives were broken before the truth emerged. The murdered wife, her grieving husband, their innocent son, the slave who lied, and the girl hidden in my chest, all are bound in sorrow woven by fate's careless hand. You probably won't survive the exhaustion tightening his voice if it were your tongue reciting these tragedies." The caliph watches him silently, stroking his beard with fingers adorned in heavy rings. Outside the chamber, the courtyard fountain gurgles softly, its water perfumed with rose petals floating in lazy circles. Mainstream historical fact: Harun al-Rashid's reign saw Baghdad reach its cultural golden age, yet it was also marked by brutal purges, poisoned rivals, and political betrayals that haunted his final years. At last, the caliph exhales, a sound like wind sighing through palm fronds. "Ja'far, my loyal vizier, life is a river of sorrow and joy tangled together. You cannot untwine them, nor can I. All we can do is keep the river flowing, lest it dry to dust and bury us all." He gestures for sherbet to be poured, cool pomegranate and sugar in chased silver cups. Ja'far sips silently, the sweetness clinging to his tongue, though it does nothing to soothe the bitter ache within him. You stand close enough to smell the citrus oil dabbed behind the caliph's ears, sharp and clean, masking the sweat of ruling an empire teetering always between splendor and ruin. The caliph's gaze softens for a moment. Go home, Ja'far. Rest. Tomorrow dawns with new petitions, new injustices, and new riddles for you to untangle. Ja'far bows deeply, setting the empty cup onto a lacquered tray. As he rises to leave, you follow him out into corridors flickering with lamplight. Beyond the arched windows, pigeons swoop down onto the palace rooftops, cooing softly as they peck at fallen millet grains. Their gentle calls seem almost mocking in this realm, where justice costs blood, tears, and unspoken regrets. Ja'far walks through the palace halls, his footsteps muffled by carpets woven with crimson and indigo arabesques. You trail him down marble stairs cooled by shadows and out into the bright courtyard, where sunlight glints off brass fountain spouts shaped like lion heads. Slaves sweep fallen jasmine blossoms into wicker baskets while pigeons flutter around them, wings flashing white against the deep blue sky. He pauses by the fountain, staring at the rippling water. The reflection of his tired face trembles with each droplet falling from the lion's mouth. You see the shadows beneath his eyes, the faint twitch of exhaustion in his cheek. For a moment he closes his eyes, inhaling the fragrance of rose petals floating on the surface, as if seeking peace in their delicate scent. Historians still argue whether viziers like Ja'far believed in fate's fixed design or in human will shaping destiny. Perhaps it was both. You think, watching his brow crease with silent questions he will never speak aloud. He turns and walks toward the palace gates. Guards bow low as he passes, their bronze helmets catching the sun. Outside, Baghdad's streets hum with noon heat. Merchants fan flies away from pyramids of fresh dates. Water sellers shout their prices, and donkey carts creak beneath loads of firewood and green fodder. You probably won't survive this heavy stillness of the day if you were fasting and burdened like Ja'far, your throat parched with fatigue and sorrow. Quirky tidbit: medieval Baghdad's water sellers carried goatskin bags slung over their backs, calling out with melodic chants said to charm even the laziest customers into buying a cup for a copper coin. Ja'far stops by a street stall where a boy fans skewers of lamb over hot coals, the aroma mingling with grilled onions and sumac. He buys a small parcel wrapped in flatbread and continues walking to his home. As he enters the shaded courtyard, his children rush to greet him, their laughter echoing off plastered walls decorated with painted floral vines. Mainstream historical fact: wealthy Abbasid homes often featured private fountains and small gardens planted with basil, mint, and bitter orange trees, offering cool retreats from Baghdad's relentless heat. His youngest daughter clings to his leg, giggling as she tries to untie his sash. He lifts her with a weary smile, kissing her oiled hair that smells of henna and rosewater. For a fleeting moment, peace softens his lined face. You feel his exhaustion ease, if only slightly, as her small arms wrap around his neck. "Father," she whispers, "tell us a story tonight." He nods, though his eyes flicker with sorrow for all the stories he cannot tell them, of drowned girls hidden in chests, of wives murdered for a single apple, of slaves who bragged their way to death. Instead, he sets her down gently, promising a tale about jinn and moonlit gardens and golden birds that sing secrets to children brave enough to listen. Outside, the sun begins its slow descent, casting molten light over Baghdad's domes and minarets, The city hums with life. Calls to prayer echo across rooftops. Neighbors gather on balconies to drink mint tea, and pigeons roost along the city walls, their feathers glowing pink in the fading light. Ja'far sinks onto a cushion in his private garden, closing his eyes as the muezzin's call melts into birdsong and distant street cries. You sense his mind drifting away from royal decrees, justice, and sorrow, if only for this fleeting hour of sunset peace. The sun slips below the western horizon, staining Baghdad's sky with deep purples and burning rose. Ja'far sits quietly in his garden, the fountain murmuring beside him, its stone basin surrounded by pots of basil, coriander, and sweet marjoram. Fireflies flicker among the fragrant herbs as dusk settles, their glow soft as drifting embers. Inside, lamps are lit one by one, their orange light glowing through carved brass screens, painting geometric shadows on stucco walls. His children gather around him, curled on embroidered cushions, their eyes heavy with sleep but eager for his promised tale. You probably won't survive the warmth blooming in his tired chest as his daughter rests her head upon his knee, her dark lashes brushing flushed cheeks. Once upon a time, he begins softly, his voice calm as evening wind rustling palm fronds above. There was a golden bird that lived in a tree taller than the highest minaret. Every night it sang to the moon, and the moon, in return, told it the secrets of the world. Historians still argue whether viziers like Ja'far found comfort in weaving gentle tales after days spent navigating deception, death, and the caliph's shifting moods. But as you listen to his words, watching the children's eyes drift closed one by one, you sense these stories soothe his weary soul as much as theirs. Quirky tidbit. Medieval Arab storytellers often mixed folk fables with court gossip to keep listeners entertained while subtly delivering moral lessons veiled in humor or wonder. Beyond the garden walls, Baghdad settles into its night rhythms. Neighbors share late meals of lentils and dates. Donkey carts creak back to stables, and the muezzin's final call to prayer dissolves into silence under a moon rising pale and full over the sleeping city. Mainstream historical fact: the Abbasid Caliphate's night patrols, led by the Sahib al-Shurta, chief of police, ensured order by lantern light, their rounds marked by brass bells tinkling softly down empty streets. Ja'far's voice softens, his story winding down like a river fading into desert sands. The golden bird flies away into the dark, leaving only its song drifting on the night breeze. His children sleep soundly now, curled under woven blankets, their breathing deep and slow. He rises with a sigh, walking to the edge of his garden. Above him, the moon glows cold and luminous, casting silver light over domes and rooftops, the Tigris glimmering like black glass. You stand beside him in silence, sensing the weight slipping from his shoulders as he exhales into the cool darkness. He clasps his hands behind his back and murmurs a prayer for mercy, wisdom, and courage to face tomorrow's burdens. You see his shadow stretch long across the tiled courtyard, merging with the shadows of basil pots and fountain edges until it disappears into night's deep embrace. And now, as the garden grows silent around you, let your breath slow with the drifting jasmine-sweet air. Imagine the golden bird's song echoing softly across moonlit trees, each note wrapping your tired thoughts in silver threads of calm. Let Ja'far's quiet sorrow drift away from your chest. Feel instead the peace of his story weaving dreams for his children beneath the stars. The fountain murmurs its endless lullaby. The city beyond sinks into quiet darkness, warm lamps glowing behind carved shutters. A breeze stirs the basil and mint, carrying their cool fragrance to ease your lungs with every unhurried breath. Release the tension from your shoulders, soften your jaw, and let your eyes grow heavy. Imagine the moon above Baghdad, its pale light bathing domes and date palms, carrying away the day's regrets on its silver beams. Picture pigeons roosting peacefully along garden walls, their feathers fluffed against the gentle night breeze. Feel your heartbeat slow to match the distant whisper of the river flowing past the sleeping city. You are safe here, wrapped in this timeless garden, free to drift deeper into rest. Let the golden bird's last sweet note echo through your dreams, guiding you to silent places beyond worry or sorrow. With each breath, sink into the softness of sleep, the stillness of peace, and the certainty that dawn will come again with quiet hope. Sleep well, dear listener. May your night be calm, your dreams gentle, and your waking bright with quiet strength.